Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of Beyond Influence. We are extremely excited. It's been quite some time. We haven't recorded in about a month, so please excuse the jitters. So much so that my digital camera isn't working today. I broke the cable, so you are coming from the lovely, or you are seeing me from my lovely webcam right in front of me, but it's all good. We're going to power through it. It's a lovely day, and we are very excited to have with us today two very special people. And if you don't by now know who I am, my name is Kwame, obviously. I'll pass it over to my co-host, Scott. It's been a while. Scott, what you been up to?
Oh, it's been crazy. We got through the new year. We just closed a big transaction, bought the company Mavely. It's been a really, really exciting start to the year. Excited to get back to the podcast, though. As fun as lawyers and bankers are, it's a lot more fun to talk to people out there, working with brands, building audiences, and creating content.
You love to see it. And, if we're going to get an opportunity to talk to some incredible people right after dealing with a bunch of numbers, it's a pleasure that we have these two. So welcome to today's episode of Beyond Influence with Bobby and Jasmine. How are y'all doing today?
Doing good. Thank you for having us, man. We've been excited, haven't we, to jump on and talk to you guys. So yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know it's we just got over the hump of Christmas and New Year's, and now we're on to the new year. So, let's break the ice a little bit. What are y'all's New Year's resolutions?
Oh, yeah, we've had a few, really, haven't we?
Yeah,
we've had a few. Like, we really wanted to focus on health. Definitely get into the gym more regularly. I think that's a pretty common one, isn't it?
We do dry January, so we're really proud of that. What else?
Yeah, so no alcohol this January. Building a business this year, that's massive for us. Buy a house. We got quite a few on the vision board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you'll love to hear it. Well, before I pass it off back to Scott, I think sometimes I get ahead of myself. So we're going to take it one step back. For a quick second, Bobby and Jasmine, tell everybody who you are. Because, I know who you are. And I know a lot of the world knows who you are. But maybe somebody who's listening is like, who are Bobby and Jasmine?
Yeah, so we're from the UK. We're based in London. Of course, we met on Love is Blind UK. We met on there, got married, and here we are.
Yeah, that's pretty much sums it up in a nutshell. I guess before this whole Love is Blind scenario, we were just normal people. We both applied on the show, and luckily enough, we did get married. But before this whole kind of, Love is Blind scenario came along, I was just a nurse. Bobby, was working on cruise ships back and forth. So we were living pretty normal lives before this whole thing happened.
And it's mad to think, like, yeah, a year and a half ago, like, we didn't even know who each other were. And obviously you can relate as well, Kwame, because you've been through the same process. But to now be sitting here, feeling like we've known each other forever, it's kind of mad. But yeah, we're still normal people, though.
Yeah.
We're still normal people. Just with a bit of a crazy story.
Yeah, it's funny. I think, we talked to a lot of folks, and it is interesting, this kind of concept of notoriety and fame, and just at the core of it, though, you are a person, and you have thoughts, feelings, emotions. And I think it's so interesting. We talk about this notion of like people as characters. And I think there's a good side to that, in that we can relate to them, we can associate with them. We maybe don't need to bring all of who they are into this narrative, this story that we're engaging with. But then it can also be very challenging in certain circumstances when, you have a full and rich life, and then everyone paints you into this box, this characterization of who they think you are based on a very narrow window. And so I guess expanding kind of out, how do you feel like being on social kind of post the show has allowed you to redefine yourself, share more of yourself with the world, and then also share your relationship and like this awesome thing you guys have created together? Like, how has it been? Has it been freeing? Has it been more challenging? I'm curious how that transition has gone.
It's definitely been more freeing because, like you say, when you go on a reality show, obviously you are sort of put into a little bit of a box because everybody that knows you is going to have a different version of who you are in their minds, and then there's your version as well. And I think for us, quite a lot of our story wasn't shown. Of course, that they followed a lot of couples on our season. So quite a lot of our story was kind of cut out. So I think now post show, being on socials and actually being able to sort of express ourselves, show people who we are, show people what we're about. I think it's actually been very freeing, hasn't it?
I would agree. I think being in a reality TV show, we need to understand they have already made kind of like a story before the show even gets released, or before we even get into the pods. We already have specific characters that we are kind of gonna portray, from questionnaires, from interviews. When I joined the show, I was very much tunnel vision and just finding a husband. So I didn't necessarily take that into consideration. And then obviously watching the show back, you kind of come to terms with what the show wants to portray you to be. So that was difficult to come to terms with. But the beautiful thing about this now is that on social media, you are in control of your narrative. You can be as authentic as you want. So that's great, I think.
That is lovely to hear. And, so what we try to do just about every episode is just get a bit of input from some people on our team. And so on that same vein of what the show paints you as and kind of how it tells a story for you that you don't have all full control over, Poppy, who was one of our graphic designers, wanted to know, the drama on the show can be a little bit intense, as we all know.
Yeah.
Just a little.
Just a little bit. How do you feel like it impacted your journey as a couple? Like, did it have any influence in terms of like how much, I guess, drama was going on in that time, or do you feel like you just ignored it?
I think we did our best to ignore it. So, like if you watch our journey, you'll see there wasn't a lot of drama between us. Any drama that did happen was kind of other people or us being involved in other things rather than it being between us. We tried to spend a lot of our free time sort of not filming together and sort of not really getting involved in things, not really socializing too much with the other couples, and nothing against anyone. It was really, we've got a very short space of time here to get to know each other. And we want to really just focus that time on each other. And I think more than anything, it was just about, I wanted to make sure that, at least from my perspective, is that I protect our peace. Of course, I think it's quite easy to get influenced or to get sort of pulled in to say things or to get involved in things that might cause a bit of friction between you. And maybe it makes better TV. But for me, I was pretty sure that we were going to get married. So it was like, well, I want to make sure that I protect our peace at all costs and that I don't really get involved in something or do something that's going to like disrespect my wife moving forward, because I got to live with that after the show comes out and, after we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
There's this kind of idea that the more controversial the topic, the more like salacious the news, the more eyeballs are obviously on it. And I think both your journey on the show and afterward, for good or bad, you're steering clear of all that controversy. And I wonder, are there moments where you go, hey, if I would have been like a little bit more spicy on this, maybe I could have gotten this following in this brand deal, or hey, maybe we should respond to this topic going on in the world. Let's get our voice out there. And I feel like there's this trade-off constantly you have to make between, I have to say things to get an audience, and a little more edgy is a little bit, more enticing perhaps. And like, how do you find that line between like what could be the opportunity, the money, the brand deals versus like, hey, I want to protect what I stand for. I don't want to be part of the drama. Like, do you ever find yourself riding that line, or like the what ifs of, hey, maybe I could go down that rabbit hole?
Yeah, I think it's something that you are aware of, maybe not at the time. So when I was actually going through the process, I wasn't really aware of that or thinking about that. But of course, after, when you watch it all back, it's quite apparent. And I think maybe some people are more aware than others, depending on what your narrative is and what your sort of goal is at the end of all of this. If you don't really plan on getting married and you're just kind of in it for the ride and the journey and, what's to come after it, then I think you're going to be very aware that, the more I create, the more I get involved with, probably the better it's going to be to some aspects, because sometimes it can, as we've seen, it can work against you where people get involved in a lot of drama or a lot of controversy, and maybe they do get the following and maybe they get talked about a lot, but it's in quite a negative way. And it's like, well, do I really want to deal with that anyway? And I think it all comes down to sort of who you are, what are your values at the end of the day? For me, I value integrity, I value who I am as a person. And I think, there's not really a lot that could sort of sway me from that. So, I guess it's different for everybody. What about you?
I think I was quite naive coming into it, not even thinking about the aftermath of influencing brand deals, etc. I kind of went into it, saying to myself, I'm going to be exactly who the hell I am. I'm not going to change for anyone. I'm going to say what's on my mind. And if people don't like it, people don't like it. If people do, then that's great. So that was never really at the forefront of my mind going into the show. My main purpose, and I really, in that moment in time, I really wanted to find my husband. And I was a massive super fan of the show anyway. So having the opportunity to, be involved in this experiment was just like, this was the right timing. It's like a dream came true. Obviously, now that you watch it back, you can see, I mean, we've never been on TV before. So we didn't know how to navigate. Oh, let's amp up the drama so that we can get more screen. We didn't even run through our minds at the time until, you kind of reflect back and
I think the sort of drama that Jasmine was involved with was things that obviously you don't get to see the behind the scenes, was things that she didn't really want to, from my perspective, having seen how all that unfolded and what led her to that point. It's kind of disappointing because I know it's something that she tried to avoid and swerve and stay away from. So, I think you also wanted to just focus on us, didn't you?
Yeah. I think being in a bubble with filming, you are away from your phone, from your friends, from reality. You are in a bubble. You are in Corfu with, the love of your life. You're with your best friends that you've met 2 weeks ago. And it's like an overwhelming situation. You kind of sometimes do act out of character. You're like, why am I acting this way? It's because you are very overwhelmed. It's a very tense environment. There are very, outside factors involved in, your relationship. We had 2 cameras following us all day, a producer. Those things can make you act out of character.
And throw tequila in the mix.
Yeah. So it just shows you being a human being. And, obviously people can take you in different ways. That's normal, I guess.
Yeah, it's so funny when I listening to both of you. It honestly feels like I'm listening to a conversation with Chelsea and I. Right. It's so funny because when Bobby was speaking about the experience, it was very much about just being true to yourself, the integrity of the matter, and what you want to focus on. And then when you talk to Jasmine, or when you answer, it's about you went in with one goal. Your goal was to work as hard as you could to make sure that you lived through the experience and walked out with your husband if that's what was meant to happen. I think that when it comes to the values, there's a lot that it says about a person. And I know there was a little bit of drama in your season about somebody who definitely came in for just the, TV aspect of it. And it's really funny because you can look at it and tell. Mm-hmm. You can look at it and tell, right? As soon as I got the example of it and then I saw this person's online interactions afterwards, I was like, yeah, I just don't jive with this person. You know what I'm saying? And when it comes to both of you, it was very authentic, and I feel very much aligned with your experience. When you're in it, if you are capable of thinking about things outside of it, then you definitely aren't there for the right reasons, because there is so much tunnel vision. There's a massive, there's this bubble, you are inside it, and there's almost no way to get out of it. When you start filming, you almost forget about the cameras and you worry about what's going on in your life. And that's why sometimes you go a little bit, to further extents, because you are really just living your experience. You're living in that moment. And, like you said, there's things that you will focus on in your values. And sometimes you value bottomless tequila, and that's okay.
Exactly.
But ultimately, as long as you are yourself, you're going to shine through. And I think that that's what ends up being the best result for everybody. If you go in not caring about what happens after, usually good things happen to you after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely.
So I'm curious, and it was when your season was airing, I kept thinking, how does this kind of Love is Blind UK, how does this cross over? Where does the audience come from? Is there going to be a big UK following? I'm curious, based on kind of what you've experienced, how much of tension do you feel like is coming from this US based audience versus UK audience? And then, when you come to the States, and is there a different feeling with the general population and the way that you're interacted with versus UK fans? And I'm very always interested in does the UK care about reality TV in the same way? Obviously, it's captured the hearts and minds of the United States, and we eat up every moment of it. But just curiously how that dynamic works, and if there's a difference in the fan base or kind of the following.
I think we didn't know how it was really going to play out in the UK because, of course, it was the first season, so nobody really knew, is it going to be a hit, is it not? But reality TV in the UK is massive. Like, UK, we love it just as much as you guys, you know. So we kind of expected it probably going to be quite popular, but we didn't expect that it'd be as popular in the US, that's for sure. Like, we didn't think, you know, you guys have already got plenty of your own reality shows, so didn't really expect it to blow up over there. And I think a lot of our fan base, at least from socials, we haven't actually been over to the States yet since it came out, but a lot of our fans on the socials are actually from the States, aren't they?
From the States, from the UK and Brazil, funny enough.
Canada.
Love is Blind Brazil is, if you see their following, they are very invested in, you know, kind of the characters on Love is Blind Brazil. And that kind of transferred over to us as well. We get a lot of Brazilian followers. US and UK mostly.
South Africa, Canada.
Yeah. You know, it's really funny when I look at my audiences as well. So I was, you know, I was just in the UK not too long ago, got to hang out with Bobby, which is a really, really awesome time. But I was actually surprised at how many times I got recognized. You know, walking through the streets, there are a lot of big, because I mean, when you think about the origins of reality TV getting really big in the UK, the first time that I saw reality, because, you know, obviously my cousins and family lived there. So I'd spent some time over there. And one summer I was there. And that's when I think the first season of Love Island came out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm, you know, I get there, I'm supposed to spend a week there. And just about every single day at about the same time, my cousin Daniela comes running down the stairs screaming, Love Island's about to come on, Love Island's about to come on. And then everyone gathers in the same room and watches it. So the fandom definitely runs deep. And I will say it's, you know, been a bit diluted since then, right? The more reality shows come out, the less, you know, like the less focus that you have on it. But ultimately the fandom is really huge. And I think, you know, going through my follower metrics as well, my number one, you know, in terms of area is North America. But if we go specifically to city, it's New York first.
Oh.
The second one is Nairobi.
Wow. That's crazy.
It's wild. So yeah, there's like pockets of areas in this world that are massive super fans. And I will say like Brazil is a huge one. There's so when I one of my closest friends growing up was or in college was Brazilian. So he taught me a kind of a proverb or a song. I got it as my first tattoo and I put it on my stories. It's deixa acontecer naturalmente. It means let it happen naturally. And the fans went crazy. Yeah, so it is really wild to see what the demographics look like. But, you know, I think all in all, obviously it's been a really cool experience. You're coming out of this. You know, do you still have any ties to Netflix or Love is Blind? Are y'all still doing things, or would you say that you've pivoted to really just focusing on your own life?
Yeah, on the most part. I mean, we don't have sort of, because, you know, when you first finish the show, you have sort of a few responsibilities that you have, you know, you'll go and do like a few podcasts, a few interviews on radio, which is all good fun as well, because you get to talk about your experience. But now we don't have that anymore. We did just do, I think with Netflix, which was WWE, yeah, with Chelsea Green, wasn't it?
Yeah.
From the US national champion. So we got to do that. We got to do a workout with her. That was super fun. That was with Netflix, but it was actually through Jasmine's management. So
but I guess, you know, ties, I wouldn't say we do. No, not with Netflix.
So I'm curious, kind of adjusting again to this, you know, post-show life. How much have you guys, do you feel like you've embraced the social media side? I know you both have your careers, you're starting your business. You know, Bobby, for you, there's a lot in the fitness space and, you know, that side of it. How have you kind of adapted the post-show lifestyle around kind of this creator-led kind of income stream or career path versus, okay, I'm gonna go back to what I know, or I'm gonna merge? Like, how did you think through that process, and kind of where did you ultimately land?
It was really difficult for me coming out, because it was like, well, you know, I didn't really get to talk about, well, at least I talked about it. They just didn't show it in the show that, you know, my background was fitness. I spent like 10 years as a personal trainer. And I was only very recently before the show working in luxury shopping as a port shopping guide. So, I mean, my audience didn't really know me as fitness at all, you know. So to make that pivot, it's always worrying because you're going into a brand new area and your audience don't really follow you for that. But at the end of the day, I just think it's about making what you're passionate about. And I went from hardly posting when the show came out. I'll probably post like once every few months. So my Instagram was pretty dry to then obviously when you're becoming a creator, people are saying, you need to post every day. You need to get active on your stories. You need to get the reels out there. So it was kind of a difficult adjustment, getting up to pace with things and getting used to filming, posting, coming up with ideas. And then it's just deciding, well, what area am I going to move into? And I just decided, well, let's do this. I've always wanted to create like a coaching business, something we spoke about even in the pods. So we thought, yeah, let's just do it. And that's where I'm at the moment. I mean, it's a little bit different for you. But that's where I'm at.
I feel like as women, we are kind of blessed in a sense. It's very easy to go into, certain niches. And mine, I mean, I've always, as much as being a nurse, but I've always been, passionate about makeup, beauty, lifestyle. So it was kind of an easy transition for me to go from the show to content creation in that specific niche. It was very easy for me. In terms of like kind of balancing, real life and content creation, I actually had to leave my full-time job because it was getting quite overwhelming, especially towards the end of kind of the premiere of the show. I couldn't concentrate. So I did have to leave for a little while. And now I just do kind of agency shifts whenever I'm available. So at least I have that balance there between content creation and also still working in the mental health field. But no, it was really difficult kind of coming out of the show. I think the year where we were still a secret, we were living our best lives. We were so happy. It was like the best time ever. And when the show came out, the anxiety was through the roof. No one can ever prepare you for what is to come because, you don't know what's going to be shown. You don't know about the edit. You don't know how you're going to be portrayed. Then outside noise as well. And this is like the first time we were experiencing this. So it was intense. I couldn't eat. It was tough. But then, yeah. I think it gets easier once it dies down a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I can agree with that. I think I say this so often is like the level of hyper focusing that the world does anytime that something is shown. It almost feels like you could do a regular thing. There can be a clip of you walking down the street and everyone's going to be like, oh my goodness, look at the way he's striding. All right. Like, look at the way he's flailing his arms. There must be something wrong.
Yeah. No, you're so right.
Yeah. It just gets to a point where it's too much. The anxiety becomes overwhelming. People will never understand what it feels like to be on reality TV until you are in reality TV, because that feeling is like nothing else. Once you get exposed to the world and everyone starts dissecting every little single thing that you do, you just like, you're right. I say this, like, you can't eat, you can't sleep. Like, I crawled into a literal ball. I remember being in our old apartment, just sitting on the ground with my back against my couch, like not opening my phone. Like, I wanted to play video games, but I couldn't focus on the video games because like I wanted to do something passive with my mind, but it was almost impossible. So getting through that hump, getting through that journey, I genuinely think like there could be a business out of
we should have like a support group.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Hi, I'm Kwame. I'm from season 4 Lovers.
It's so funny you bring that up because I think about that in like day-to-day life, because you see whether it's on the news or in social, all these little tiny moments that get blown up. And like the last couple of weeks with the inauguration and all this, every little thing has been scrutinized, and it's insane because I think about my own life and I'm like, if I had the hyper level of detail from any kind of audience, I'm like, oh, the things that they would run with. Because you go, okay, Ivanka shows up in a green dress. Oh, that's the dress from Handmaid's Tale. She's clearly saying to everyone that she needs help. And then like Barron stands up and literally just looks at the crowd and they're like, he's going to be the next president. Clearly he's cut out for it. I'm like, he's 18. He hasn't said a word. He's literally just looking at the crowd. And I'm like, what are y'all talking about? So like, not political left or right, but it's just crazy the run. And it's like, you have the clip of George W. Bush making faces, and it's just all these things, just the little inklings of someone just looking sideways. And it's like, oh, here's this whole narrative, and it's wild. And I just think, that's the good and the bad of some of the social media. It's like, I think there's almost a power in not trying to respond to the narrative or just letting it be and moving on. Obviously, if there's something outright that happens, like, you have to address and engage. But like, PR is no joke. And I think that is one thing that, as people grow their following, or they have this instant, like, overnight notoriety, handling really, really complicated PR situations, it's far more complicated, I think, than people realize. Often too, because you don't tend to have the voice. And so maybe the good and the power is, like, social does afford you a voice. Whereas, maybe the news outlets or these other creators or other people writing things about you, or, Kwame talks a little bit about being blown up on TikTok. He's never going to have the gravity himself with his following to counteract all of TikTok. And it's just like, you're completely, outgunned in that PR battle. So it's really interesting. I'm curious, have there been, like, moments where you're, like, sitting there and you're like, do I engage? Do I not engage? Is there, like, a moment where you accidentally engaged, or you're like, ooh, I shouldn't have done that? I like, always want to coach other creators and people coming up to this experience of, like, hey, I did this, learn from it in this moment, take a beat, whatever. Are there any moments for you that stand out?
Yeah, especially when the show came out. I mean, everybody had an opinion, and it's funny because I feel like everybody does become an expert, especially, people do have these big followings, and fair enough, right? You're on a reality show. At the end of the day, people are going to have their opinions. That's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately. But everybody becomes an expert. And like you say, the smallest things get blown up, and they turn the smallest action into, like a whole story and a whole narrative. And sometimes it couldn't be further from the truth. And I just think there was little things when the show came out, such as things that happened with Jasmine and the Ollie Demi situation, her getting involved in that, and everybody had an opinion on that and what it meant without knowing sort of the backstory on it. And of course, people were talking a lot online and saying certain things. And obviously, I think the best thing to do is sort of stay away from it, because if you read every comment, you're probably going to come out of it feeling quite depressed. But you do see things, unfortunately. That's just the way it is. And a lot of the time I did sort of want to reach out, and sometimes did reach out, and have a bit of a response. But at the end of the day, what's the point in arguing with people? Most of the time you're not going to change their opinion anyway. Most of the time they're going to fight back, and you're just going to create more controversy, more problems. You're going to come out of it feeling even worse. So it's a difficult one, isn't it?
I think coming out of the show, I mean, I'm a very kind of passionate, spicy character anyway. And if a narrative that was not the truth, which, ended up happening on the show, came out and I wasn't able to say my piece, I mean, I was asked to be in a podcast after the show, and I was quite riled up in that moment in time, people having an opinion without knowing the full context. And if I told you the full story, you guys would be mind blown. But anyway, Bobby said, you know what, think about it. Maybe not go on the podcast. And I said, no, I'm going on that podcast. And I've had so many people come up to me after the fact and said, you know what, the story makes sense. And I'm so glad you were able to speak your truth, because you didn't have the opportunity to speak about that on the show. So I guess double-edged sword. I wouldn't be advising to like go on podcasts and saying your truth all the time, because then it's kind of makes you look a bit guilty. Like you're trying to persuade people to believe, kind of your side. Say your piece, say it with, with honesty, depth, just be honest, and people will see that. And that's it. Once you've said your piece, that's it. You don't have to say it again.
I love that. And I think it's really important when it comes to anything that goes on with who you are, your image, your brand, the way that you're displayed to the world. Quality is always more important than quantity. Like at the end of the day, if you put out one really solid, important message, it's going to hit the right audiences. The people who need to hear it will hear it. The issue with that is if you pick up a megaphone and you consistently scream into it and you try to combat whatever message is coming towards you, it's just going to be noise and it's going to get lost, and then nobody's going to care or listen. And so it's really important to focus on the quality there. So I'm glad that you went that route. And, there's a few questions that we'd like to make sure that we touch on as we go through the conversations. And I think this sets us up for one of the perfect ones. I think as you're going through your journey all the way from Love is Blind to this point, what do you think has been like, I would say the most memorable or most impactful part of your journey in getting you to this point?
I think getting married, of course, that's a huge one. If that's what you mean. I think then moving cities for us. I think a big thing was going to be, how do we actually navigate? Obviously, me giving up my old job, moving to London within a couple of days after getting married, and then us having to sort of navigate married life in a new city. At the time, we were in quite a small apartment, and it was like, well, can we survive this? And if we could, I think that was really going to set us up for the future, which we did, of course. And then we moved into a bigger apartment, into a different area. And I just think that for us, the building blocks that we put in place in probably the first 6 months was, and I think it is for any couple, is going to be like do or die, if you can get through that, I think you're setting yourself up for longevity. And for us, that's probably the most important part, isn't it?
Yeah, I feel like at the beginning, there was a lot of growing pains. I mean, I was single for a long time. I had lived by myself. I was living in my own apartment. I was okay with providing things for myself, and then having someone else come into my house, sharing my space. Obviously, there's dynamics. You're together 24 hours a day. I was working 12-hour shifts, 4 days a week. I was exhausted, but then I still had to show up as a wife. And I wanted to be the best wife. And I was putting so much pressure on myself to show up. And one day he said to me, I'm not expecting anything of you, babe. Just be yourself, relax. And that's when I realized, you know what, let me just kind of let it go a little bit. I think the main turning point for me is when we moved into our place together. I was like, oh shit, I've signed a contract with this man. It felt more real than our actual wedding day, to be honest with you. Because I'm like, we have to, kind of, rely on one another in terms of finances. And there's a lot of trust that, bearing in mind, we didn't even know each other for that long. So yeah, that was a massive kind of turning point for me, but I think it had to be done. I'm glad that we moved in together, 3 days after the wedding day, because it really did set us up in a positive way.
And it was a challenge, wasn't it? Because, like I was saying initially, we were saying maybe it's going to take like 2 months before we actually move in together, because there's a lot, that you have to really prepare for, especially when you move into a new city. But then Jasmine's just like, let's just do it now. What are we waiting for? And then looking back, I think that was definitely the right thing to do, rather than wait, because that waiting period when you're not together trying to do long distance, I think it could be difficult.
Yeah, so I guess, putting it all together, getting to this point, getting an apartment together, like there's a lot of big steps. I feel that as well. I know we almost went through the exact same track. We moved in together 3 days later. That was a lot right after the wedding. And so going through that, was there, like you said, it didn't feel real until you stepped in there, and it was like it got all consuming. You know what I mean? Was there a come to Jesus moment for both of you to just look at each other in the eyes and be like, oh my gosh, did we really do this?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it was we both put a lot of pressure on ourselves. It wasn't like external pressure. Like I was putting pressure on myself as a husband, making sure I need to provide. I want to make sure that we're in a position that we can move into our new place when we want to move into the new place. So it was like pressure on myself, like I got to make this happen. And then Jasmine's pressure coming, I need to show up as the best wife. I need to make sure that I can get back home and still be loving, still be caring after I've worked my shifts. And then I think when we finally did it, when we finally moved, we pack up all the stuff. It took us like a full day. We loaded the van ourselves. And I think on that first day when we actually moved in and we're here, it's just like, it was just looking at each other like, yeah, we did it.
I think, the pressure of, someone moving to another city for you, not having friends in London. He, grew up in Stoke. He spent majority of his life in Stoke, all his family there. And he has a massive family. I felt that pressure to make him feel comfortable in a new city. And obviously being newly married as well, there were a lot of, pressures for him to not think, he might want to move back, which I don't mind moving to Stoke anyway, but I wanted him to be comfortable in this new environment, in this overwhelming situation that, that we are now in. I just wanted you to be comfortable. And I guess that's where the pressure came from. I didn't want you to feel like you didn't feel at home.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it from me was just like, you're already enough. Everything you're doing, who you are right now and the way you're showing up, you are enough. You don't need to do any more than what you're already doing. So
It's funny. I just think about like the the whipsaw of how fast all that transition, like new city, new identity, new job, new relationship, new following, all of it kind of colliding at the same time. I always laugh because it feels like, whether you're creating content or you're in the business world, it feels like there are those moments in life where just all of the transition collides at one moment. And I don't know, it's a fun chaos, but it also feels completely overwhelming at the time. I think those moments are also really interesting because you have a lot of choice in that moment in defining who you are. Because I think one of the coolest things is it's almost like I'm gonna botch, whatever the UK grade system, but going from like middle school to high school, there's a bit of a redefinition. Like I can choose to be now Bobby in high school, all new friends. This is me, and now I'm Bobby in London, married Bobby, and this is who I get to be. And I think that's cool. I think those redefinition moments, while they can be overwhelming, they also give you this sense of, in the lack of control is a control. And I think that's a really cool notion. And I think people don't always capture that or understand when those moments happen, that they actually have control now, because that whole family in Stoke, that whole friend group who's like Bobby from when we were 5 years old, always going to be the same Bobby, you can choose now to present yourself how you like. And I think it's a really cool opportunity that more people should be like present in the moment and choose proactively to define. I think maybe that comes to a good thing is now you're launching this business. I want to hear about that and kind of what led you to that decision. Is this part of this new definition of kind of what you want next, and maybe how that all flows together?
Yeah, like the way you put that is so nicely put, because I think it is very difficult, isn't it, to sort of leave behind that old identity. Obviously, your friends and family, they're going to always see you as that person. So as much as you've probably gone through a lot of growth periods, which I feel like I have, people don't really see that growth, and they're always going to see you as that old person that they always remembered. So it is nice to kind of just start afresh, I think. But in terms of the business, that's something that I've always planned on doing. Well, I say always, probably for about the last 4 years. I think since COVID happened, it was something that I had in mind. And then I've just kind of hopped back and forth between ships and working away, that it's just never really come into fruition. And then when we were, speaking in the pods, I sort of mentioned the fact that I had this in mind, and, we spoke about maybe doing something together in the future, but nothing ever really came about. And then I just think it was more recent, like last year. It's something that I keep talking about. And then I'm just like, well, why don't we just do it, and let's do it together. Jasmine's background in terms of mental health, my background in terms of fitness, weight loss, just really combining the two. And of course, her thing is really mindset as well. I think, helping women really empower themselves, helping them become more confident, breaking old habits, breaking the old habit of sort of being themselves and sort of reinventing a new version of them as well. So I think combining the two things, we just kind of thought it's a no-brainer not to do it,
I love that kind of balance too of the physical fitness and the mental health piece. And they really do go together. So like, I feel like so many times people try to make a change and they want to create, whether it's, their physical appearance, they want to feel stronger, they want to enjoy the way they look. It's funny, there's this identity piece. And I remember there was a fitness coach and they were saying, there's a moment of disconnect in your identity going through a major transition. Because if you were to say like, I'm Bobby, the fitness guy, I'm going to like really prioritize healthy eating. But let's say you're 30 pounds overweight. As you're trying to craft that identity, everyone's like, you're a joker. You're 30 pounds overweight. You've ate like a slob your whole life. That's not you. And it just reinforces like this counter narrative to this new person you're trying to become. So it's interesting, like the mental health perspective, like this definition of self. I just think there's a really interesting tie-in of identity, mental health, and physical fitness. Because I can say, here's a macro calculator, eat your macros 4 meals a day, work out, weight training 4 times a week, do a little bit of cardio. And it's like, that's a pretty known formula. But why is everyone in the world not fit and muscular and enjoying life? There's so much more complication to it. And there's kids and life and schedule. So I'm curious, as you approach it, like, what is your approach to the business going to be? Like, there's the online kind of fitness coaching, there's the in-person personal training, there's like the holistic self kind of side. Like, how are you guys choosing to attack it?
Yeah, so everything we do is completely online. We want to reach as many people as possible. So everything we do is online based. It's all one-to-one. So it's about really giving people, because like you said, everybody knows what to do, right? I think all you got to do is go on Google, right? And most people will know the basics, right? I got to move more. I got to eat less. But it isn't that simple, right? If it was, everyone would already be in the perfect shape. So I think it's about accountability for one. I think a lot of people, especially starting out, need accountability. They need somebody there that's actually going to keep them on track, make sure that they are following through. People need support as well. I think when you're not sure about something, or maybe when you have a bit of an off day, a bit of a wobble, as we call it, you're going to need somebody there to sort of pick you back up, because a lot of people who sort of get to a point of maybe being overweight, being out of shape, they've obviously got very used to the way that they're living, right? So it's very difficult to make a change, and it's difficult to make any type of change. If you're used to maybe, not working, if you're used to showing up drinking every day, if you whatever your bad habits might be, it's very difficult to go from that to the complete opposite, right? So I think support in the beginning is really important. Everything we do is one-to-one. We focus on sustainability, because just telling somebody to go from eating junk food every day, snacking, not tracking their macros, never working out, never going to the gym, to all of a sudden tomorrow expecting that person to be tracking their food, to be working out every day, and to be living a healthy lifestyle, it's very unrealistic. So it's about gradually implementing new habits, helping people really improve their relationship with food over time, and helping people, like you say, shift their identity so that once they've actually lost the weight, they're able to sustainably keep it off, because that's now who they are.
I love that too. And progress isn't perfection. I think it's so funny because I've talked to a lot of people and they're like, oh, I started counting macros and it's so time consuming. It's got to be perfect. I was like, you're literally eating like piles of junk food. If you miss your protein target by 5 grams, it's not, you're so far in the better side of things. And so, whether it's making decisions at work or making decisions with your diet, like, the reinforcing and recurring decisions you make, not perfection, but like if you're 80% right and you were 5% right before, the difference is going to be monumental. I think in fitness too, I don't think people appreciate how actually fairly small changes can make a really, really big difference if done even over just a few weeks. And so I think, like, I love the way that you're approaching it, which is kind of this holistic move, not the seeking of absolute perfection, but like, how do you create these sustainable long-term behavior patterns? And it's funny coming like completely full circle to this resolution concept and like how we started off. That is the one thing with resolutions. It's so like binary often. And I hate the notion of like, just tomorrow I'm going to stop doing something. And I think a more realistic goal of, I'm going to be more present, or I'm going to focus more on this particular thing, or there's an aspect of my relationship. And it's funny because I end up coaching folks a lot. And even I was talking to my daughter and she does gymnastics and she was, I'm really nervous about my competition. I was like, break it down. There's 4 events. There's like your mental preparation, your physical prep. Where do you feel unprepared? And she's 8. So she's just like, I don't feel like I know my floor routine well enough. I was like, well, every day, let's do it 2 more times. And then competition comes and she's ready. And like, that's the kind of resolution where it's like, I'm going to pick one thing. It's a weakness. It's something I've been avoiding. And for a lot of people, that might be their diet. It might be part of the relationship. It might be building an audience and connecting more with folks, or I'm going to grow more of my business through social. And so I just think I like this notion of like small but meaningful progress stacked on top, because that is a lot more sustainable. Not to rant to y'all, but like I very much aligned with how you all are approaching the business. And it sounds like it's going to be a great endeavor.
For sure. I think our main focus as well is kind of understanding what are your whys into reaching those goals. Because we can say, oh, I just want to be skinny and look good in the mirror and fit better in my clothes. But there's a deeper reasoning why they feel the way that they do in present time and they want to make these changes, right? And it is very difficult. Sometimes you will have clients who aren't really ready to make that transition yet. And it's just kind of working with them, giving them that patience in order to kind of navigate through those feelings and emotions of a massive life change, which is massive, which is why, we kind of have to be with them every step of the way, because there are going to be times where they relapse. There are going to be times where they have we have a safe word in our coaching program. If you are having a bit of a hard day, just say wobble, and we'll know what you mean. We always do morning check-ins throughout the day if they have any questions in relation to, kind of food, diet, workout, any pain. We're there to support them. And I feel like if someone's making such a drastic lifestyle change, it is important to support them throughout the way. Because also, we were talking about this on our coaching call, actually. When you're making a drastic lifestyle change and people around you aren't, sometimes you can feel a bit, alone. You don't feel like people can relate to you. It's very easy to say, why are you being a Debbie Downer? You can't have a pizza with us. You're in different kind of times in your life. And, it's about telling them, you know what, it's okay. Not, fear of missing out. No, let's remove that. That pizza is always going to be there in 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, 4 weeks' time. You're in a different journey, and that is okay.
That is powerful. I love to hear it. I don't think we don't think about that every single day, but it is true. I feel like when you are going through critical change, and that's why I think sometimes it is important to change the community around you. It's not to say like ostracize or leave people behind, but it's really important that the people around you have the same goals. And I remember like my life changing drastically when I just jumped into a group of guys who thought in a certain way. I felt way more motivated and way more on track with just like my mindset, because the people around me reinforce that. If they go against it, you start second thinking yourself as well. So I do think that's important. And, obviously now that you have started to forge your own path within, finding what your identity is, and then crafting it into a business, you started with what the basics of influencing were, when you did. And since you have, what have the brand relationships been like and the brand partnerships been like?
I think for Jasmine, it's been incredible, hasn't it? Since she's came out, she's got to work with so many brands, different types of brands, but a lot of her dream brands as well. So I think a lot less for me. We've done some stuff together, which has been really nice. And I think as a guy coming off a show, typically, it can be like that. But for Jasmine, and, for our joint venture, it's been incredible, hasn't it?
I think I didn't realize how powerful like organic tagging was going to be. I mean, I'm working with a brand, Sol de Janeiro, and they're like my ultimate brand. I spent hundreds of pounds on this brand. And I literally just posted a video of Bobby going into my drawer and stealing my Sol de Janeiro products. And that got traction because it's very relatable, Men do go into their girlfriends or wives or partners' cupboards and steal their toiletries. That's just what guys do, They dip their fingers in there and they just, use it. And that was very relatable to the audience. And that got traction from the company to be like, oh, okay, to develop a kind of a good working relationship with me. So organic tags for sure. I think relatable content and just being consistent. I think consistency is everything. If you want people to continue following you, the consistency has to be there. Another thing is engaging with your audience. You can't expect people to digest your content on a daily basis and comment and like if you're not engaging with them. And I think each and every comment I do reply to, it's time consuming, it is, but those people come back and they do appreciate your interactions with them. And in turn, brands will see that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've worked with a few brands now and you're naming a few, which is great. I think one thing that we like to ask our guests is if you could have a dream brand out there somewhere that if they hit you up right now, you would do a backflip. What brand would that be? What's your dream brand to work with?
Mine would be, I'm a massive sports fan, so mine would be Nike, or Nike as you guys call it. I'm just a massive fan, from ever since I can remember. I think they make great footwear. So I used to play a lot of football. Always had the Nike boots and then Nike trainers or sneakers, and they got some nice clothes as well. So for me, that'd be, I think, my number one. What about you?
Mine's going to be a bit boring. And I don't know if the NHS, the National Health Service, I know extremely boring. But on a deeper level, let's just talk about it, right? Being a nurse, obviously being on TV as well, I feel like a massive responsibility to be a voice for nurses in the UK who are underpaid. A service that we do have, which is great because it is very helpful to people all over the UK, but a service that is extremely underfunded. Service users who are not getting the right support because the service is underfunded. I think raising an awareness for that kind, for the NHS, the National Health Service, would be massive for me. To work with them would be great. Yeah. Because I could tell you all beauty brands and all these things, but something that kind of is important to me as a person, still working as a nurse, yeah, the National Health Service for sure. I would love to work with.
I love it. I think one thing that hits me in this, and it's funny because I think, Jasmine, you mentioned it earlier, kind of spicier personality, and it came across in the show. And I think maybe this is that other side of you, that deeper side, that caring side, the professional nurse who dedicates their life. And, my wife came up as a nurse, was working in oncology, and I don't think people have an appreciation for how just emotionally draining that role can be, whatever, whether it's cancer or just kind of, general care. It's exhausting to absorb people's challenges and see the worst that can happen consistently. And then to also have underfunding and lack of resourcing, putting nurses at risk, putting patients at risk. I think it's definitely a worthy cause. So I'm a huge supporter of nurses and helping them out. I think just the shifts and what they're asked to do. And I don't know the specific nuance in the UK. So if I'm speaking out of line, but it's a very, very challenging position in so many ways, exhausting mentally and physically. And I think it is an absolutely necessary profession. And it's one where you go in and, I don't know if people have a full appreciation of the sacrifice going in, but I think a lot of people are called and drawn to that position, and it's admirable. So it's been amazing connecting with you all. I just love these conversations too, because, we see just such a little snippet of your life and your relationship and your story on the show. And I love that we get to unpack kind of the deeper side of what you guys are thinking about, your relationship, your business endeavors. And I also like too, you've taken this maybe non-traditional approach post-show of not just needing social media, but like, we're going to create a business. I'm going to pursue a passion that I had before the show. I'm going to leverage this audience and platform to go do something and impact the lives of others. And it's something that unifies you as a relationship and as a couple. It's like a common thing you can put your energy into. So I love that you get a chance to show that other side of yourselves. It's really awesome.
No, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. And no, it's been a pleasure. We really enjoyed this.
We love a chat, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
Well, we're both glad that you love a chat, because I do think we had a great chat. It's interesting. We definitely spent a lot of time on Love is Blind. I know we wanted to talk a lot more influencer stuff, but you have such a really cool, unique story. And so it helped guide the conversation where it needed to go. So ultimately, thank you both so much for your time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Do y'all have any last words to impart on our audience before we head out?
Yeah, thank you for everybody that's watching us. That's, of course, showed us support, showed us love, tuned in, watched us. We appreciate all of you.
All right.
Awesome. Well, we'll see y'all on the next one. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.